The Vexari aliens had taken over 17 star systems in the past 30 years. They were very good at conquering planets with their advanced technology. When they found Earth, they thought it would be easy to conquer. They saw that most of Earth was covered in water and thought this would make their job simple. Commander Zith led the first group of alien ships to Earth. He looked at a 3D image of Earth floating above his control room. "Just another simple world," he said to his second-in-command. "Their technology is hundreds of years behind ours. We can take over their land in just days." His helper nodded in agreement. "And the big oceans will be perfect for our water soldiers. The hydromancers will do very well there." The hydromancers were the best soldiers in the Vexari army. They were made to fight in water and could control water currents and live in very deep places. No water creatures had ever beaten them. Before starting a full attack, the Vexari always sent small teams to check for any possible resistance. One team, led by Captain Krell, was sent to look at a coastal area on what humans called the Gulf of Mexico. It was there that they first met Jack Miller. Jack was a fisherman, just like his father and grandfather before him. At 57 years old, his face showed the marks of many years spent fighting wind and waves. His small fishing boat, named Sea Whisper, was not fancy, but Jack knew every part of it like the back of his hand. That morning started like any other. Jack got up before the sun, got his fishing gear ready, and went out to check his crab traps. The sea was calm with just enough wind to make small waves on the surface. The sunrise made the sky orange and pink as Jack moved through waters he knew well. He noticed something strange about a mile from shore, an unusual movement in the water that wasn't caused by normal currents. As he moved closer to see what it was, the water began to glow with a strange blue light. "What on earth?" Jack said to himself, turning off his engine to drift closer. Under the water, Captain Krell and his team of 5 hydromancers watched the boat come closer with interest. Their see-through bodies, made for deep space and underwater places, glowed with light as they talked to each other without making sounds. "A simple boat," Krell noted, "likely with just one human in it. Perfect for our first test." The plan was easy. Catch the human, get information about Earth's defenses, and send the data back to the fleet. The hydromancers turned on their hiding abilities and began to move up toward the fishing boat. Jack felt the change before he saw anything. A small difference in how his boat moved on the water. Many years of fishing had given him an almost magical connection to the sea. Something was coming up from below. When the first hydromancer broke through the surface next to his boat, Jack didn't react with the fear that the aliens expected from beings they conquered. Instead, the old fisherman calmly reached for the gaff hook leaning against the side of his boat, a tool he'd used many times to pull big fish onto his boat. The hydromancer, confused by Jack's lack of fear, paused for a key moment. It was all the time Jack needed. With a quick, practiced motion learned over decades of catching big fish, Jack stuck the gaff into what looked like the creature's shoulder and pulled hard. The hydromancer, even though it was stronger than Jack, wasn't ready for this move and found itself partly pulled onto the deck. "Well, aren't you something?" Jack said, his voice steady as he reached for his fishing knife. 4 more alien heads broke the surface around his boat. Jack knew he was in trouble, but he didn't panic. He had faced storms that would make most people cry. These strange water creatures were just another challenge. The second hydromancer tried to climb onto the boat. Jack kicked it square in the face, sending it back into the water. The third shot a jet of water at him, but Jack ducked and the water hit the boat's motor instead. "Playing dirty, huh?" Jack muttered. He grabbed a net and threw it over 2 of the creatures as they tried to board. They twisted and turned, but only got more tangled. Jack had caught much stronger fish in his time. The hydromancers had never faced someone like Jack before. They were used to fighting with advanced weapons and tactics. But Jack was fighting with something they didn't understand. Years of knowledge passed down from father to son about how to survive on the sea. One of the aliens managed to get on the deck. It moved toward Jack with its arm formed into a sharp point. Jack grabbed a heavy metal fishing box and swung it hard, hitting the creature in the middle. The alien fell back into the water. The fight lasted less than 5 minutes. 2 of the hydromancers were caught in Jack's net. 1 was stuck on his gaff hook. 2 had escaped, but they were clearly hurt. Jack looked at the alien caught on his gaff. It wasn't moving anymore. He carefully put it in his big cooler with ice. The proof would be needed. No one would believe this story otherwise. As Jack started his boat's motor and headed back to shore, he didn't know that he had just changed the course of an alien invasion. The Vexari had made a big mistake. They thought Earth's oceans would be easy to conquer because humans were land creatures. What they didn't understand was that humans like Jack Miller had spent their whole lives learning to survive on those waters. The aliens had the better technology, but Jack had something more valuable: the knowledge of generations of fishermen who had faced the sea's dangers and lived to tell the tale. The invasion of Earth had begun with a major error. News of the failed mission reached Commander Zith 12 hours later, when the surviving hydromancers returned to the main ship. 4 of the 6 team members had not come back, including Captain Krell. "Not possible," Zith said angrily, his skin flashing red. What kind of defense could stop 4 elite hydromancers? The report from the survivors made no sense. A single human, using simple tools made for catching fish, had somehow beaten highly trained warriors. Even more strange was that the human had no modern technology, just basic knowledge of the water and simple tools. "Maybe it was just luck," said his helper. "One skilled human is not a threat to our whole army." Commander Zith was not convinced. "Send more scouts. I want information from all major ocean areas. If humans have found ways to fight our water, soldiers, we need to know before we send in our main forces." Within 2 days, more reports came in from around the world. A woman named Alice Carter had used fishing nets to trap and stop hydromancers off the coast of Maine. In the South Pacific, a pearl diver named Bob Franklin had led scouts into a coral reef they couldn't get out of. Near the North Pole, a crab boat captain named Frank Peters had somehow found approaching hydromancers using only simple equipment made to find schools of fish. The pattern was becoming clear and very troubling. Humans who spent their lives on the water had knowledge and skills that made them tough opponents, even without fancy technology. Meanwhile, Jack Miller had gone back to shore with proof of the encounter. The damaged body of a hydromancer was in his cooler, on ice next to his day's catch of fish. Local officials didn't believe his story about sea aliens at first, but the proof was right there in front of them. Within hours, military people had come to the small coastal town. Jack found himself in a quickly set-up command center, surrounded by high-ranking officials and scientists eagerly looking at his find. "Mr. Miller," began General Susan Wright, "we need to know exactly how you managed to beat these creatures." Jack shrugged, uncomfortable with all the attention. "Been fishing these waters for 40 years, ma'am. My father fished them for 50, years before me, and his father before him. You get a feeling for things that don't belong. But their technology is hundreds of years ahead of ours," said a scientist, looking at the remains of the hydromancer's equipment. "They can control water currents, handle extreme pressure, and talk without making sounds. Doesn't matter how fancy your gear is if you don't know the waters," Jack replied simply. "These things might know space, but they don't know oceans. Not like we do." As military leaders around the world talked to other fishermen, divers, and sailors who had met the aliens, they heard the same thing. Humans had been sailing, fishing, and surviving Earth's oceans for thousands of years. That knowledge, passed down through generations and practiced every day, was a big advantage against even aliens with better technology. By the end of the week, military planners had started making a defense plan that relied heavily on the knowledge of people like Jack Miller, those who understood the moods and movements of the ocean in ways that technology alone couldn't match. The core of this plan was a simple truth. Earth's oceans weren't just big pools of water. They were complex, living systems that humans had spent thousands of years learning to read and respect. The Vexari, with all their advanced technology, were treating these waters as just another place to conquer, rather than a place to understand. And that would be their downfall. The aliens decided to attack the Gulf of Mexico first. They sent 300 hydromancers to establish a base for their invasion. But this time, Jack Miller wasn't alone. The quickly formed Gulf Defense Fleet had over 200 boats ranging from fishing boats to pleasure craft, each captained by someone who knew these waters well. They weren't military ships, but they carried something more valuable: generations of experience. Jack's boat, the Sea Whisper, now had military sonar and communication equipment, but he hardly looked at the fancy displays. Instead, he watched the water itself, noticing small changes in currents and the way local fish were behaving. "They're coming," he said over the radio, 10 minutes before the military sensors found anything. About 2 miles southeast, moving together in a group. General Wright, leading the defense from a command ship, had learned to trust these intuitive readings. "All boats get ready as planned. Remember, these waters are yours, not theirs." The plan itself was simple, using traditional fishing techniques but made bigger for war. Large nets normally used for commercial fishing had been strengthened and electrified. Depth charges were changed to create confusing pressure waves rather than deadly explosions. Most clever of all, several boats carried tanks of shark blood and fish parts, a move suggested by Lisa Davis, a marine scientist and weekend sailor. "Even alien invaders need to learn about the food chain," she had explained. As the Hydromancer group approached, they stayed in perfect formation, showing their military training. Their intelligence told them there would be little resistance. The simple boats on the surface seemed to be running away in all directions. "The humans run from us," reported the group commander to the mothership. "We will take the coastal area by nightfall." Commander Zith, watching from orbit, wasn't so sure. "Their movements seem planned. Are you sure they're running away?" The question came too late. The seemingly random pattern of the fishing boats had actually been a carefully planned move, drawing the Hydromancer formation exactly where Jack and the other captains wanted them. "Now," Jack called over the radio. Dozens of boats at the same time dropped their modified fishing nets, creating a circle around the alien formation. Before the Hydromancers could react, electrical currents went through the water, temporarily stopping their ability to control currents. Confused and separated from their unit leaders, individual Hydromancers found themselves facing opponents who understood the battlefield far better than they did. Fishermen who had spent decades fighting powerful fish in these same waters now used those skills against the aliens. They knew how to tire struggling opponents, how to predict which way they would run, how to use the current itself as both weapon and barrier. On the eastern side, Lisa Davis's boats used their secret weapon. Hundreds of gallons of shark blood and fish parts went into the water, bringing in the Gulf's most aggressive predators. While the sharks couldn't seriously hurt the Hydromancers, the sudden arrival of dozens of feeding bull sharks created chaos in the alien ranks. "They're breaking formation," reported a Coast Guard officer watching the sonar displays. "Complete chaos." Jack nodded, not surprised. "They don't respect the water, don't understand it's already full of killers that've been getting better at hunting for millions of years longer than these aliens." By sunset, the Vexari force was running away. Over 60 Hydromancers had been caught, twice that number were missing, and the rest fled back to the mothership. Earth's first big defense against the invasion had worked without a single military ship firing a normal weapon. Commander Zith, watching the defeat from orbit, felt something he hadn't felt in decades of conquest: doubt. "How?" he asked his advisors. "How did simple boats defeat our elite forces?" His helper, looking at the battle data, finally understood. "Sir, I think we have underestimated the humans' relationship with their oceans. They aren't just moving across the water, they're reading it, using knowledge built up over countless generations." Commander Zith stared at the blue planet below. For the first time, he wondered if the Vexari Confederation had finally met its match. Not in technology or military power, but in something more basic: the deep knowledge that comes only from generations of hard-won experience. As reports of similar defeats around the world reached the Vexari command ship, Commander Zith realized he needed a new plan. If the humans could defend their coastal waters using deep knowledge and simple but effective tools, perhaps the answer was in the one region they couldn't easily reach: the deep ocean. "Our new command center will be set up 7 miles beneath the surface," Zith announced to his war council. "In the Mariana Trench. Even the most experienced human divers cannot operate at such depths without technology." The plan made sense. At extreme depths, water pressure would crush normal human submarines, and military subs able to reach such depths were few in number and limited in what they could do. The hydromancers, made to withstand crushing pressures, would have a clear advantage. Within days, the Vexari had set up an underwater fortress at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean's deepest point. From this seemingly safe position, they began building massive current manipulators, devices able to change Earth's ocean currents on a global scale. Once activated, explained the chief engineer, these devices will disrupt the Gulf Stream, the Japanese Current, and other major ocean pathways. Human coastal communities will face massive flooding, while inland regions will experience devastating climate changes. They'll be too busy fighting to survive to mount any resistance. On the surface, military analysts detected the unusual activity in the Mariana Trench but struggled to come up with a response. Even the most advanced deep-sea vehicles could only carry small crews and limited weapons. A direct attack seemed impossible. It was during a strategy meeting at the Pentagon that someone mentioned Jack Miller again. Didn't he say something about deep-sea fishing in his younger days? 24 hours later, Jack found himself in Washington, D.C., looking at detailed seafloor maps alongside military commanders and ocean scientists. "You're saying these alien fellows are hiding in the Mariana Trench?" Jack asked, studying the maps. 7 miles down, confirmed Admiral Richard Kelly, beyond our effective military reach, but they're building something big down there, something that will weaponize our own oceans against us. Jack rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "You know, the deep ocean ain't so different from the shallows in one important way. It's all about pressure and knowing how to use it." "What do you mean?" asked the Admiral. "When I was younger, I'd sometimes go after swordfish in real deep waters. Those fish can dive over 2,500 feet deep when they're hooked, trying to use the pressure to snap your line. But if you know what you're doing, you can use that same pressure against them." Jack's eyes lit up as an idea took shape. The thing about pressure is it's not just about depth. It's about changes in pressure. Quick changes that nothing, not fish, not submarines, and probably not these aliens, can easily adapt to. His proposal was bold, a coordinated effort to trigger a controlled underwater landslide near the alien base. The resulting pressure changes and underwater currents could disable or destroy their facilities without requiring direct human intervention at those impossible depths. Geologists and oceanographers were doubtful but interested. Detailed analysis of the trench walls revealed unstable sediment buildup that could indeed be moved with precisely placed deep-water charges. "It's basically chumming for landslides," Jack explained with a shrug. "Stir things up in just the right spot and let nature do the heavy lifting." 3 days later, a small fleet of research vessels positioned themselves above carefully selected coordinates surrounding the Mariana Trench. Each carried specialized equipment designed to deliver seismic charges to precise locations on the vulnerable trench walls. Jack, aboard the lead vessel with Admiral Kelly, watched the deployment monitors with the same patient focus he brought to setting complex lines for catfish. "Timing matters," he explained to the Admiral. "Just like when you're trying to catch fish that feed in shifts. Too soon or too late, and you miss your chance." As the charges reached their designated positions, oceanographers monitored the underwater topography, looking for the optimal moment to trigger the sequence. "All charges in position," reported the technical team. Admiral Kelly looked to Jack. "It's your show, Mr. Miller." Jack studied the monitors for a long moment, watching subtle current indicators that most others would have missed. Then, with the same decisive movement he'd used to set a hook in a big fish, he gave the order. "Now." Deep beneath the surface, precisely calibrated explosions triggered a cascading series of underwater landslides. Millions of tons of sediment began flowing down the steep walls of the trench, gaining speed and force with every passing second. In their fortress below, the Vexari had only moments to realize the danger before the first wave of silt and debris struck their installation. The massive pressure changes shattered external sensors, while the sheer weight of material began crushing outer compartments. "Impossible," Commander Zith gasped as emergency alerts flashed across command screens. "They can't even reach these depths." But the humans hadn't needed to reach the depths themselves. They had simply used their understanding of Earth's natural forces to let the ocean do the work for them. As his base crumbled around him, Zith finally understood what his reconnaissance teams had tried to tell him. Humans didn't conquer their oceans through technology alone. They conquered them through respect, understanding, and generations of accumulated wisdom. The kind of wisdom that knew exactly where and how to push to. Let nature itself become the ultimate weapon. The Vexari Command Center was completely destroyed. Only a few escape pods managed to leave the collapsing base. Commander Zith was not among the survivors. Back on the surface, the monitoring team watched as massive turbulence readings gave way to calm. Then, one by one, deep-sea sensors began to show the ocean currents returning to normal patterns. Did it work? Admiral Kelly asked, turning to Jack. The old fisherman nodded, a small smile on his weathered face. The ocean has her own ways of keeping balance. We just had to remind her that some things don't belong in her depths. Word of the victory spread quickly across the globe. In coastal communities from Maine to Malaysia, from Norway to New Zealand, fishermen and sailors who had joined the defense effort celebrated in their own quiet ways, not with parades or speeches, but with the simple act of returning to the waters they knew so well. For Jack Miller, the greatest reward was the chance to get back to his crab pots and fishing lines. 3 days after the Mariana Trench operation, he was back on the Sea Whisper, watching the sun rise over the Gulf of Mexico. As he dropped his first line of the day into the familiar waters, Jack reflected on what had happened. The aliens had come with technology centuries ahead of humanity, yet they had failed to understand the one thing that mattered most, that Earth's oceans were not just obstacles to be conquered, but living, breathing systems that demanded respect. It was a lesson his grandfather had taught him on his first fishing trip, and one that had saved not just his life, but perhaps all of humanity. The Vexari were not done with Earth yet. The loss of Commander Zith and their deep-sea base was a big blow, but the alien confederation had never lost a war. They were not about to start now. The new commander, a veteran named Loris, took control of the invasion fleet. Unlike Zith, Loris believed in learning from failures. He spent 3 days studying all the battle reports, looking for patterns in how the humans had defeated them. "I see the error in our approach," Loris told his war council. "We have been fighting the humans in the environment they know best, their own oceans. We need to change the battlefield." The plan he outlined was simple, but dangerous. The Vexari would use their most powerful weapons to alter Earth's climate. By firing heat beams from orbit, they could melt polar ice caps and raise the sea level worldwide. This would flood coastal cities and force humans to fight on two fronts, against the Vexari and against nature itself. In the chaos of global flooding, Loris explained, we will deploy our forces not just in the oceans but in the newly formed inland seas. The humans will be too scattered to coordinate a defense. The Vexari fleet moved into position around Earth, their weapons powered up, aimed at the North and South poles. On Earth, scientists noticed strange heat signatures in orbit. Military analysts quickly understood what was happening. In an emergency meeting at the United Nations, leaders from around the world gathered to face this new threat. "They're trying to melt the ice caps," explained the chief science advisor. "If they succeed, sea levels will rise at least 10 feet. Every coastal city on the planet will be underwater." General Wright, who had coordinated the Gulf defense, slammed her fist on the table. "We have no weapons that can reach their fleet. Our most advanced missiles can't even get halfway there." The room fell silent. After defeating the aliens in the oceans and even in the deep trenches, it seemed the Vexari had finally found a way to attack that humans couldn't counter. Then a voice spoke up from the back of the room. It was Alice Carter, the fisherwoman, from Maine, who had helped defeat the first Hydromancer scouts. "We need to ask Jack Miller what he thinks," she said simply. Jack had returned to his fishing, wanting nothing more than to get back to his normal life. But when the call came, he didn't hesitate. 6 hours later, he was in New York looking at satellite images of the Vexari fleet. "They're sitting up there just out of our reach," explained Admiral Kelly. "Getting ready to melt our ice caps. We need ideas, Jack. Something crazy like what you came up with for the Mariana Trench." Jack studied the images, his weathered face thoughtful. Then he asked a question no one expected. Do these aliens understand storms? The question caught everyone off guard. A scientist started to explain that the Vexari likely had advanced weather prediction technology. Jack shook his head. That's not what I mean. Do they understand storms like people who've lived through them understand storms? Do they respect them? He turned to Alice Carter. Remember that hurricane in '98? The one that came up from nowhere? Alice nodded, her eyes widening as she began to see where Jack was going with this. Weather prediction is good these days, Jack continued, but the ocean still surprises us. Being able to predict a storm isn't the same as knowing how to ride one out. He pointed to the satellite images. These aliens are sitting in space thinking they're safe. But space has its own kind of storms, doesn't it? The room's attention turned to the NASA representative, who nodded slowly. Solar storms. Coronal mass ejections from the sun. They can cause electromagnetic disruption, especially to unshielded electronics. Can we predict them? Jack asked. Yes, to some extent, the NASA scientist said. We monitor the sun constantly. In fact, he paused to check his tablet. Our solar observatories are tracking unusual activity right now. A major solar flare is forming. If it erupts and sends a coronal mass ejection toward Earth, it could arrive in about 36 hours. Jack smiled. And would these aliens, sitting pretty in their ships, know about this storm coming their way? Understanding dawned across the room. The Vexari, focused on their attack plan, might not be paying attention to solar activity, something they might consider irrelevant to their military operation. Even if they know about it, added a military strategist, they might not understand how severe these solar storms can be. They interfere with electronics, communications, everything. Jack nodded. On the water, the fishermen who survive are the ones who respect the storms and know how to prepare. The ones who think they can beat a storm with fancy technology often don't come home. A plan quickly formed. Earth's defense forces would not try to attack the Vexari fleet directly. Instead, they would prepare for the coming solar storm, shielding their own critical systems. Meanwhile, they would try to keep the aliens distracted and unaware of the approaching danger. For the next 24 hours, small military craft engaged in feint attacks against the Vexari fleet. These were not serious attempts to damage the alien ships, just enough activity to keep their attention focused on Earth, rather than the sun behind them. At the same time, scientists worldwide worked to improve their predictions of the solar storm's intensity and timing. If it was too weak or missed Earth entirely, the plan would fail. Jack Miller, for his part, found himself aboard a military aircraft circling high above the Atlantic. From there, he helped coordinate with shipping vessels that were being used as decoys to draw Vexari attention. Just like setting up a trot line, he explained to the military officers. You don't just throw it in anywhere. You need to make it look natural, make them come to you. 32 hours later, the solar storm hit. A massive wave of charged particles slammed into Earth's magnetic field, creating spectacular auroras, visible even in tropical regions. More importantly, it washed over the unprepared Vexari fleet with devastating results. Alien ships that had been powering up their climate weapons suddenly went dark. Communication systems failed. Navigation systems gave false readings. Some ships drifted out of formation, while others fired their thrusters randomly, sending them tumbling through space. On Earth, protected systems continued to function, allowing human forces to watch as the mighty Vexari fleet fell into chaos. 3 alien ships, their guidance systems completely fried, dropped too low and burned up in Earth's atmosphere. It worked, whispered Admiral Kelly, watching the display. It actually worked, Jack Miller nodded quietly. The sea taught me long ago. You don't have to be stronger than nature. You just need to understand it better than your opponent does. These aliens may have crossed the stars, but they never learned to respect the storms along the way. As the Idar solar storm passed, the remnants of the Vexari fleet struggled to regroup. Their climate attack plan was in ruins, their forces scattered. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Vexari Confederation faced not just defeat, but humiliation. And it had all happened because they had failed to understand what any experienced fisherman knew. No matter how advanced your technology, Nature's power demands respect. 3 months after the solar storm, Jack Miller stood on the deck of his boat, Sea Whisper, watching the sunrise paint the Gulf waters in shades of gold and red. The peaceful scene showed no sign of the global conflict that had nearly destroyed Earth. After the failure of their orbital attack, the Vexari had tried several desperate plans, including sending suicide ships to crash into Earth's oceans. None had worked. The remnants of their once mighty fleet had finally left Earth's solar system 2 weeks ago, marking their first defeat in 30 years of conquering other worlds. Jack had gone back to his fishing roots with little fuss, preferring the company of the sea to the medals and ceremonies the government had tried to give him. The only change to his simple life was a new sonar system installed on his boat, a gift from a grateful military that he rarely used, preferring his own senses honed. Over decades on the water. "Beautiful morning," said a voice behind him. Jack turned to find Alice Carter, the fisherwoman from Maine who had become a friend during the conflict, standing on the deck beside him. She had traveled south to join a meeting of ocean defenders, the network of fishermen, sailors, and maritime workers who had formed Earth's most effective defense force. "That it is," Jack agreed. "Fish should be biting good today." Alice smiled. "Hard to believe it's all over. That beings advanced enough to travel between stars couldn't handle what we deal with every day." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "That was their mistake, I reckon. They saw our oceans as just water, something to be crossed or conquered. They never understood that you don't master these waters. You learn to work with them, to read them." The world had changed in the months since the invasion. Governments had set up new defense systems designed to detect any future alien approaches. But the most important change was in how humans viewed their relationship with Earth's oceans. For centuries, people had often treated the seas as obstacles to overcome or resources to exploit. Now, following the example of people like Jack and Alice, there was a growing understanding that the oceans were complex systems that demanded respect and understanding. Universities had started programs focusing on traditional maritime knowledge, recognizing that the experiences of fishermen, sailors, and coastal peoples contained wisdom that modern science alone couldn't provide. Jack had been asked to teach in several of these programs, though he had politely declined. His place was on the water, not in a classroom. "They want me to come talk to the UN next month," Alice said, making a face that showed what she thought of the idea. "About incorporating traditional fishing knowledge into global climate planning," Jack chuckled. "And will you go?" "Suppose I have to. Someone's got to explain to the suits that you can't just read about the ocean in books. You've got to feel it day in and day out through storm and calm." Jack nodded in agreement. That was the lesson the Vexari had never learned. Their advanced technology had given them the power to cross vast distances of space, but not the wisdom to understand the worlds they found. In orbit above Earth, the last Vexari observation vessel prepared to enter faster-than-light travel. On its command deck, the newly appointed Commander Lara, successor to the failed Loris, conducted a final review of the failed campaign. "Add this to the official record," she dictated to her helper. "Earth is to be classified as a prohibited conquest. Target. While technologically inferior, its dominant species possesses a relationship with their world's major systems that functions as effectively as any advanced defensive system." The helper, who had witnessed the defeats firsthand, added his own observation. Their advantage wasn't technological but generational, knowledge passed down and refined over thousands of years of living with their oceans. Commander Lara stared at the blue planet on the view screen. "Perhaps that is a technology of sorts, just not one we recognized in time." She gave the order, and the last Vexari ship disappeared into the depths of space, leaving Earth's solar system behind. The Vexari would not return, at least not until they had learned the lesson that Jack Miller and countless others like him understood instinctively. True mastery comes not from conquering nature, but from understanding and respecting. Back on Earth, life was returning to normal. In coastal communities around the world, fishermen went about their daily routines, but there was a new sense of pride in what they had accomplished. Their knowledge, often dismissed as simple or outdated in an age of advanced technology, had proven to be humanity's greatest defense. A week after Alice's visit, Jack was out on the Gulf before dawn. The morning was misty, with just enough light to see the water around his boat. He was checking his crab pots when he noticed something strange in the water nearby. For a moment, his heart raced, remembering the first hydromancer he had encountered. But as he looked closer, he saw it was just a pod of dolphins, their sleek bodies breaking the surface as they played in the early morning light. Jack smiled, watching them with appreciation. The aliens had never understood what made Earth special. They had seen the oceans as just another battleground. But to Jack, and to the dolphins swimming freely nearby, these waters were home. He started his boat's engine and moved toward his next crab pot, leaving the dolphins to their play. The sun was rising higher now, burning away the morning mist, revealing the vast blue expanse of the Gulf stretching to the horizon. Jack Miller, fisherman, defender of Earth, keeper of generations, of maritime wisdom, prepared for another day on the waters that had defined his life. Waters that, thanks to him and thousands like him, remained free. The Vexari had believed Earth's oceans were unconquerable until they met those who had never tried to conquer them at all, only to understand them, respect them, and pass that knowledge forward through time, from one generation to the next. As his boat cut through the gentle morning waves, Jack thought about his father and grandfather, who had taught him everything he knew about these waters. And he thought about the young men and women who were just starting their lives on the sea, who would carry this knowledge forward long after he was gone. That was the true power of humanity, not their weapons or their technology, but their ability to learn, to adapt, and to pass on what they had learned to the next generation. It was a simple idea, but powerful enough to defeat an alien armada. Jack checked his compass and adjusted his course slightly. There were still fish to catch, traps to check, and a day's work to be done. The aliens were gone, but the sea remained. Beautiful, powerful, and worthy of respect, just as it had always been.